Well, hello, and welcome to the PJH Writing Command Center. And I am Paul John Hausleben of God Bless the Keg Publishing, LLC. And I am the flagship author, chief photographer, music critic, music review. I do some videos. Chief cook and bottle washer. How's that? And also the owner of God Bless Keg Publishing, LLC, which helps me do all these things because I don't have anybody else to do them. But welcome, here we are at our first ever God Bless the Keg Publishing, LLC podcast. And I've had a lot of folks over the years ask me about, why aren't you more active? Why don't you do things on social media and podcasts? And we do have a YouTube channel, and I've been more active on that as of late. And in the olden days, when I was first starting out, I actually appeared on a couple of radio broadcasts, and that's a different story. I've always been a radio man, so I guess this is a natural thing. Being a ham radio operator, Whiskey Alpha 2 Alpha Sierra Quebec. But hey, we're going to give this a shot and have some fun with it. One of my mentors, one of my favorite personalities, one of the folks that really influenced me is the great Gene Shepard from WOR Radio back in New York City. And as a kid growing up in Paterson, New Jersey, I'm guilty of having the transistor radio behind my pillow, even though my parents told me I couldn't do it and I had to get to sleep, and tuned it in. I think it was 710 on the AM dial, and old Shep, who was Whiskey 2 Oscar Romeo Sierra, was his ham radio call sign. And old Shep would come on 9:15 to 9:45 at night, every night. And I would religiously tune him in and always marvel at his raconteur skills and how he could just ramble on and on and on, telling stories, and then drift away from the stories and end up coming back to exactly the story that he was going to tell initially, and then wrap it all up before the 10 o'clock whistle where he had to go off the air. And some of you might know Gene Shepard from A Christmas Story, the little kid with the BB gun at Christmas time, and Shepard actually appears in that movie. And he's a great influence on me. So this is a lot of fun. I'm going to play with this. And I did do some audio work about 10 years ago, and I still have some of those recordings. But people ask me randomly just so many questions, and they're like, Paul, you ought to have a podcast. You ought to be able to bounce these ideas and all this stuff off of your audience of people that know you. You ask you sports questions and book, stories about my books and what influenced me on here and there. And I wrote the book Experiences about my experiences, and now I'm working on more experiences because I have too many doggone experiences. But what kind of inspired this is Alex Ovechkin of the Washington Capitals, who in the National Hockey League broke Wayne Gretzky's total goals for for a career in the NHL, and he broke 894 goals and scored his 895th goal. And that kind of inspired me because I was on a Paulie rant, and where I work at, other things that I do, a lot of people knowing how passionate I am about hockey, and it is my favorite sport. I mean, I love my Nottingham Forest, come on you Reds, and I love my Yankees, and I love my Jets, and the NFL might be a subject down the line, but when it all boils down, I'm a hockey guy, and I played the sport. I was a goalie, played at, I'm not going to say a high level, but I played, and we'll talk about that. I was a pretty good goalie. Number 27. And if you pick up the book Geyer Street Gardens, it'll have a lot of non-fictional / fictional about my hockey career. And National Hockey League is not what it used to be, as many things aren't these days. And as I've gotten older and older and older, and now I'm just plain old, I look back on things, and some people say nostalgia is just great memories and great feelings and how good things used to be and everything. But I've been taught to be very logical. My grandfather always told me to be very logical. My English grandfather, my mom's dad. And he lived upstairs from us, and it was a huge influence on me. And he was a smart man. One of the smart, if not the smartest man I ever met, and had the equivalent of what would be an 8th grade education here in America. And he always said to me, Paulie, don't react on emotions. Stand back, listen to the right side, listen to the left side, and make a logical decision based upon the facts. Don't just jump at your emotions. And that's kind of stuck with me throughout my whole life. And my own dear mom, she accuses me of being way too logical. And I guess that's probably pretty true. But in regards to the NHL, I really studied it because people say, oh, this was a record that would never be broken. I don't think anybody will beat Gretzky's total points in the NHL. But when I look at the goals, I was like, Now, a record that will never be broken would be Cy Young in baseball, 511 total wins. That's a record. That's not being broken. You would have to average 26.5 wins over like a 20-year career to break that record. And pitchers are... That's a subject that we're going to drill down on in these podcasts because the young people nowadays, they, as we probably all did in our own generations, they think it's the greatest right now. And that's probably the heart of my discussion. And we all do that. We think we have the best music, the best sports. We had the best way of living, the best cars, the best politicians, the best teams to root for. The girls were prettier. The beer was colder when we were young. And I think every generation does that. But to circle back to being logical, I study things and I remember history and study history and really appreciate things that happened years ago as well as what's happening right now. And I'll get back to Ovechkin and Gretzky, but I'm going to digress a little bit. In one of my careers, I used to travel the whole nation and travel extensively, maybe 300 days a year on the road. And I met a bartender. There's a lot of bartending stories in my experiences, and I wonder why that is. But I met a bartender in Oakland, California, in a hotel. There was a boring seminar, and I couldn't take it anymore, and I would bump out and have a couple Manhattans at the bar in the hotel, and there was a guy, Pete, the bartender. And I'm going to write a short story about Pete. And Pete was like the smartest man I ever met, along with my English grandfather. And Pete was so profound, he would pour you these drinks and tell you these stories and have these profound statements. And we were talking about something, and I don't remember what the subject was, but he said, the problem nowadays, Paulie, is people forget history. And that's really, really true. That's really, really true. So to get back to the NHL, and I'm going to confess I'm not a Washington Capitals fan. Don't have anything really against them. It's just certain sports franchises grind my gears, and I don't know why. It's some kind of hidden prejudice. And the Washington Capitals grind my gears. I don't know why. Ovechkin seems like a really nice guy. He's played 20 years in the NHL, and I mean, people love him. They say he's a great teammate. I don't like the Carolina Panthers in the NFL either, and I don't know why. I don't like the Houston Astros, the cheaters in baseball, so I have a reason for that. Don't like the New England Patriots in the NFL because they beat up on my Jets and used to get all the calls before the Chiefs did. But I have one reason that I don't like these franchises. But I'm going to confess, I don't like the Washington Capitals. But I respect Ovechkin, 41 years old, I think. And he broke his lower leg there, missed a bunch of games. It didn't look like he would break the record, and he did break the record. So you look back on these things and say, oh, congratulations, that's a great record. It was never going to be broken. Nah, that's not a record that I ever felt would be that way. I mentioned Cy Young. I'll think of some other records that I just don't think will ever be broken. And maybe I'll bring that up on another podcast. But let's drill down. Is this really, and I wrote a blog about this, is this really in professional hockey the record? And it's interesting because one of my hockey idols is Mr. Hockey, the great Gordie Howe. And people say, oh, you can't compare eras. And I think you can, especially in the National Hockey League, because when Mr. Howe came into the league, there were only 6 teams. So think about that. People say, oh, athletes now are so much bigger, better, stronger. I don't believe that. Is Babe Ruth going to come to bat in the modern baseball and not be able to hit a home run? No, I just don't believe that. Is Bob Gibson going to get on the mound and not be able to strike out Aaron Judge? No, he's going to strike him out. I mean, Bob Gibson was a machine. These guys in this day and age, they're always hurt. They don't play the amount of games that they used to play. And I'll get Gibson's stats out for another podcast. But my goodness gracious, they're a bunch of cupcakes nowadays compared to the old players. But they're supposed to be so much better and stronger. Is Dick Butkus not going to be able to make a tackle in the NFL? No. Butkus is going to be Butkus and rip your head off. And I just don't believe that. And as a goalie, facing slap shots, even in my lower levels of playing, I faced 100-mile-an-hour slap shots with old wooden sticks, with no graphite, with no synthetic material in them. There's a great video of Al McGinnis of the Chicago Blackhawks taking a slap shot, and Kelly Rudy was the goalie. And Rudy wanted no part of that slap shot. It sailed over the net, thankfully, because it would have killed him, and broke the glass in back of the net, shattered it. I don't know how hard that slap shot was, probably 115 miles an hour. So if you give Al McGinnis a modern stick and let him shoot in the NHL, is his shot not going to be as good? Bobby Orr, they said, they didn't have the technology. He could probably skate 30 miles an hour on old leather skates. I think he used Bauer Tacks. So if you give the great Bobby Orr modern skates with all the modern blades and the synthetics, is he going to get slower? Is he not going to be one of the fastest skaters in the NHL because everybody now is so much better? No. I don't believe it in it. Nothing. So let's look at the stats. And I'm going to start with the fact that the WHA was a league competing with the NHL. And it was an acrimonious merger. Some of the great players went to the WHA, Bobby Hull, Gordie Howe. Wayne Gretzky started with the Indianapolis Racers in the WHA, which folded and he ended up at the Oilers. But Gretzky actually started, I think it was 18, in the World Hockey Association. And they were competing for players, and it was acrimonious. And finally, the NHL said, look, we're going to take the best teams. So I think, my memory, Winnipeg Jets, Quebec Nordique, Hartford Whalers, and Edmonton Oilers all came into the NHL. But they considered it an expansion, not a merger. Unlike when the old AFL merged with the NFL after the Jets beat the Colts in the 1968-69 Super Bowl. They took all the records of the AFL and merged them into the NFL. With the WHA and the NHL, they didn't do that. They considered them an expansion team. So all those WHA records are sitting out there in limbo. But it was a professional hockey league with great players. So let's look at that. So Gordie Howe would have had, if you merge his WHA and NHL, he had 801 NHL goals and 174 goals in the World Hockey Association. He would have had 975 professional goals. That's what the record really is in professional hockey. Gretzky had 46 goals in the WHA. Bobby Hull had quite a few too. I think he ends up at 901, although I didn't put it on my notes. So Gretzky has 940 professional goals. Ovechkin has a long way to go if you really look at professional goals. Now, another interesting aspect. Now, Gordie Howe played a lot of games, 2,186 professional games. Gretzky, 1,487, and Ovechkin, 1,488. And that includes WHA, NHL. Ovechkin has the most empty net goals in NHL history. He has 65 empty net goals. And that's what kind of caught my eye about this, because he didn't want to take a shift when he could have broken the record, and he was telling his coach, no. And I wondered why he did that, because he didn't want to be put in a spot to break the all-time record with an empty net goal. And I respect that. He actually passed to another teammate another game so that he could score rather than him. Take a sip of water here. Gretzky has 56 empty net goals. Now, Howe, even though he played 2,186 professional games, only has 12 empty net goals. Is that remarkable? Remarkable. So what really is the record? And people say, oh, you can't compare eras. True. And people say, oh, it was easier for Gretzky to score on the old-time goalkeepers. Let's look at that. As a goalie myself, wearing the old pads, wearing the old catching glove and the stick glove and a fiberglass mask, the great Bernie Parent said, it doesn't hurt to be crazy as a goaltender. but it certainly helps if you are crazy as a goaltender. And I paraphrase that, but yeah, it does, because those pucks on the mask really hurt. This modern equipment, the catching glove looks like it's the size of Texas. The goalies can't skate. They have a different crease. They have this crazy trapezoid. There's no two-line passes anymore. There's no neutral ice play. The pads on their legs are huge. They flop down all the time. Stand on your skates. Goaltenders used to, when I went to goalie clinics, they told me I had to be the best skater on the ice. I had to be the best skater. Goalies can't skate anymore. They don't even get out of the crease to stop the puck whipping around the net anymore, because most of them can't skate. Stand up. Cut your angles. Make the save. Look at videos of Bernie Perron. Do you think Ken Dryden, the goalie for Tampa Bay, is huge, right? Big Russian guy. Huge. Ken Dryden's a huge guy, too, wearing thin pads. Do you think Ken Dryden, if he put those pads on in the modern NHL, wouldn't be a great goaltender? Come on. So let's look at this. In the NHL, because they say goalies are so much better. No, that's bull hockey. In the NHL season this year, they averaged 6.37 goals per game. That is the highest since 1993-94, 6.48. I randomly picked 1973-74 season because Bernie Perron shared the Vezina Trophy with Tony Esposito from the Chicago Blackhawks. They averaged 3.20 goals per game. And don't tell me there weren't great scorers. Phil Esposito, Bobby Orr, Bobby Hull. This is the era of, the Bruins were loaded. Terry O'Reilly, all these great players that the Flyers had to beat to win the Stanley Cup. Bernie Perron, in 1973-74, his record was 47 wins, 13 losses, 12 ties. He had a 1.89 goals against, 12 shutouts. He faced 2,006 shots. His save percentage was .932. He played 73 games. 73 games. I looked up the best goalie in the league in 24-25, Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuck. 61 games. He had 46 wins, 12 losses, 3 ties. He faced 1,633 shots. He had a 2.02 goals against, a .924 save percentage. The goalies are so much better now, even with these giant pads and flopping around like beach whales in the crease, a bigger crease, and graphite sticks, and these supposedly so much better athletes who are shooting and so much stronger. And that's the best compared to Perron in 1973-74, and it was 3.20 goals per game, 6.37 now. So it's hard to compare eras? Absolutely. No question. But I think, to get back to Pete the bartender, we have to remember history. We have to respect experience. And young people nowadays don't respect experience of older people. They look back and say, oh, well, you had this and you had that, but we have this and we have that. And that's a byproduct of social media and cell phones and having access to Google. And they can Google anything they want and come up with the answer. But you're never going to convince me in a million years that Gordie Howe, Bernie Perron, Ken Dryden, Bobby Orr, Bobby Hull, pick the old-time player, They're not going to come into the NHL now and sit the bench because they stink. There were only 6 teams in the NHL. Only the cream of the crop made it to the National Hockey League. You saw the best of the best. There were only 6 goalie starting positions open. There were only 6 teams. Then the first expansion came with the Flyers and the Blues, et cetera, so forth, and it watered it down a little bit more. Now, how many teams are there? So you're going to tell me that the great Russian goalie, Tretiak's not going to come over to this NHL and be able to stop a hockey puck? That Bobby Orr won't be able to skate as fast as he did back then? That Guy Lafleur, Mike Bossy, him and Maurice Richard, I think, 50 goals in 50 games. So I think when you look at these records, you got to respect the history. You got to respect the past. And you're short-sighting yourself if you don't respect that. You walk through the Hockey Hall of Fame and you see these great players and you say, oh, well, not as good as such. No, they are. They absolutely are. You give Bertie Parent those modern pads and I'm stand-up style, and I guarantee people are not going to know how to score on him. His reflexes are going to be just as great as they were back then. But at any rate, so there's my rant. Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is the first podcast, and hopefully it made some sense. I had some fun doing it, and I hope you'll tune in again. We'll maybe analyze another sports era. Maybe we'll do baseball with Bob Gibson and Sandy Koufax. What was it, Gibson? 1968. Look, there's your homework. Look up the stats of Bob Gibson in 1968. Look up Greg Maddux. The year escapes me. I think 95. I could be wrong about that. Look up Sandy Koufax, total complete games. They still had to go out on the mound and throw the baseball. Now these guys can't last more than 5 innings. But the modern athlete is so much better. It's a mystery. It's fun to talk about. If you have your own comments and tell me I'm full of beans or agree with me or disagree, I love that. You can reach us at godblessthekegpublishing at gmail.com. Spell the whole thing out, godblessthekegpublishing at gmail.com. And I'm Paul John Hausleben, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time.